3.5 years ago when I took office, two of my administration's main focuses was economic development. We've been very successful. We've brought 250 new businesses into the city, but we also wanted to focus on housing. We've been very successful at that. Whether it's condos, refurbishing an old hotel, we're building apartments and homes. We have, over the next couple of years, 1,100 new housing units coming into the city of Warwick. As I said, we've been very successful at it. Now, these bills introduced by the Speaker and others, we're hoping, we're doing well here in Warwick, the rest of the state's not. We're hoping that this energizes the housing market. We're not going to solve this housing crisis without available units coming online. We're not going to lower the prices of rents or homes without doing that. And I'm confident, and the League of Cities and Towns confident, this is going to go a long way towards helping with that. So with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce Governor Dan McCabe.
Happy to be here as well, here in Warwick as always, and you're always a good host. And to be here with my, the fellow leaders in the state, our senators in front of me here, and our reps over here, and as well as our speaker, who certainly is someone who's leading the charge on the housing issue. So Speaker Sakaji, thank you so much for being here in your hometown is not an accident. Thank you. Right, and of course with the Lieutenant Governor, who I know not only as a municipal leader but also as a Lieutenant Governor, that the housing issue has been a front and center issue for her as well. So this housing issue is an economic issue, front and center. It's one where we're right now we've got some momentum in the state, and we want to keep that momentum. It's things like our labor force is at an all-time high. We've got close to 600,000 people working in the state of Rhode Island right now, just under 600,000. That's a record number. Our GDP growth last quarter exceeded the New England average 3-1, the national average 2-1. This is because we've got a certain amount of momentum, and I think that a lot has to do the way that we're investing our dollars. Whether we're investing our dollars putting people to work at really good paying jobs. If anybody hasn't seen our new state health lab and the public-private partnership that is developed there, there's putting windows on that building downtown Providence right now, putting people to work at good paying jobs, and with the potential to make sure that they can afford to raise their families here right in the state. But we got to make sure that there's housing that actually provides that opportunity to raise your family in our state of Rhode Island. So I know that we've made this, I know our administration has made this a top priority, allocating $250 million of the APRA funds a few years back. Got a bond on the ballot this year, $120 million, that is really geared towards creating inventory, so that not only do we have need to fill, but that also creates a more competitive market. We want the market to drive things, but we got to actually add inventory to that market. And part of that is, which I'm really pleased when I was just come back from Chicago on the convention, and the Vice President Harris talked about home ownership and adding 3 million houses or rental facilities in the country. We're ahead of that game, and we're going to be able to take advantage of that. That actually becomes a reality. So all of us gathered here today, to address this issue of housing. And today, the bill citing is evidence of that collaboration is working. Homeowners now have the right to develop accessory dwelling units on their property to accommodate qualifying family members. When my mom was living, and I think everybody knows my mom, we actually had an accessory unit put on for her when we built our home back in 2005. So Cumberland has been doing that, but now to lead the charge, Speaker, to show that this can happen on a statewide basis, I think it's really, really very important, right? When my mom moved in to the place that we were building, she opened up a 4-bedroom home that she raised her family in. And then somebody actually moved into that house that was able to fill up the bedrooms and raise their family over the last 20 years. So now municipalities can count mobile home units as affordable housing if they meet certain requirements. We meet with municipal leaders on a regular basis and talk about these critical issues. I remember having lunch in the stateroom, and one of the municipal leaders was really talking about why aren't we counting mobile home units as part of the inventory that we're trying to build. And so it's great that the General Assembly has moved to actually make that a reality. I'm happy to sign that bill today. The process of getting building permit has just gotten easier with the use of electronic permitting. And speaking of efficiencies, the state will launch a pilot program that gives cities and towns the authority to combine zoning and planning boards, which I think is again an effort for us to streamline local municipalities to actually accommodate the work that's happening in the General Assembly, both on the Senate and House side, with partnership with our office. There are changes to regulations to make it easier for developers, easier for municipalities, and easier for homeowners. Housing isn't just making homes available when we need them. We should be proactively in this process years ago, and there's catch-up. But these funds and these pieces of legislation make it possible to do that catch-up. Housing isn't just making homes available when you need them. It's about preparing in advance like we are today. It's also about long-term and growing generational wealth for families, in every elected, community, every community in the state of Rhode Island. Home ownership, I'm really happy that's hitting a national discussion. We've been talking about that, at least I have now for a few years. Major upside for us to have more and more affordable strategies to get people into their first homes. We want Rhode Islanders to know that we will continue, as governor, will continue to work with our General Assembly and our municipal leaders to keep the momentum going. Our work is certainly just beginning, and we need to be very strategic in terms of how we build out this inventory so that we can hit the goals that we've set on our 2030 plan, hit the goals that we've set on our Learn 365, where we want in every home, every day, learning matters. This only adds to the potential earnings, and so raising incomes in the state of Rhode Island, as I said in my State of the State address in January, is a key piece as well. So with that, thank you for your leadership again in the General Assembly, and happy to be signing here today, and I'll hand it over to Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matthews. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership and for allocating funding for housing, because that's the only way how we're going to solve the housing crisis that we have. I remember when I was appointed Lieutenant Governor, when the governor appointed me to the position, the media asked me what was going to be my priorities, and I said housing. And I remember getting feedback from a lot of people telling me, why are you saying housing? That's too difficult. That's something that cannot be done. The work is too hard. You should get something that is more easier to accomplish politically. But housing is the #1 crisis that we've been dealing with. And I'm so honored to have this opportunity to publicly thank Governor McKee and Speaker Shakashin and Senator Ruggiero for the work that they have done to prioritize housing. Especially, I want to say to the Speaker, without your leadership, this would not be possible. And I want to thank you for seeing the needs that we had in the state of Rhode Island and making sure that housing was this important part of your legacy here in the state of Rhode Island. So I'm just very honored to have this opportunity to introduce you and to say thank you for the work that you have done.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Good morning, exciting, good afternoon, I should say, it feels like morning. But thank you for coming here today, and I have some prepared remarks, but before I do that, I just want to recognize the people who are here today in the General Assembly. Of course, my chairman, Chairman Craven, Chairman Solomon, Representative Diaz, Representative Boylan, Representative Deputy Whip Ackerman, Representative Cruz, Representative Speakman, or Chairwoman Speakman, you'll hear from her shortly. And I'll take the opportunity, because my good friend, the Senate President, is not here today, but to recognize the senators who also play a very important part. Senator Burke, Senator Takoyan, Senator DePalma, Senator Murray, Senator Coleman, and of course my Senator Mark McKinney as well. And I know what you're going to hear later on from the Acting Secretary of Housing, Senator Connors. So people ask me, why do you feel so passionate about housing? Because all good outcomes come from housing. We can talk about education, we can talk about healthcare, but if people don't have a place to go home to at night, what is it all for? So all good outcomes come. And let me tell you something, we have done a lot of good things. The governor talked about it, the bills, and we're going to sign them. They're all individually moving the needle, but we need to work together. I appreciate the very kind words from the governor, lieutenant governor, but I can't do it alone. I need partners in government, and I have them with my colleagues in the General Assembly. I certainly have them with Governor McKee, my good friend, who we work very, very closely with housing. We were putting together the largest single bond in the history of Rhode Island. Governor was adamant that a good portion of that bond be used for home ownership because it was important to him. And we saw the wisdom of that, and we included that in a very significant amount. He's made a significant investment with ARPA funds. We've done that with the prior Secretary Pryor of Housing and the current Secretary, and hopefully with the future Secretary Governor. But we need to work together with the Lieutenant Governor everywhere else. And not every community has embraced the changes. But I have to say something. This is not a political statement. This is just a fact and reality, and I want to call it out. Mayor Picozzi and the city of Warwick, in particular the Warwick Planning Department, I know Mr. Kravitz isn't here, they have embraced these changes. And Warwick is leading the entire state in building permits. The entire state. Thank you. Yeah. It does not happen. It does not happen. Not every municipality is as welcoming as that. And I will tell you, not every municipality has adopted them. Some have adopted rules to try to thwart the changes we've done. And that's a sad state of affairs. And they will face the voters come November. But the reality is that we have been far, far behind the rest of the country. We have been dead last per capita in housing starts for a long time in Rhode Island, but things are changing. There are successes to report. Building permits are up. The backlog in the housing court that we've established a year and a half ago is dramatically less. We have made it easier to do business here in Rhode Island. We have made it easier for the private sector, and I see my friends from the Rhode Island Builders Association, to work so they can use private funds to build more housing. Partnering with the nonprofit sector, and Melina Lodge, and of course Rhode Island Housing, and Amy Renone, of course, and Carol Ventura. It doesn't happen unless we all work together. And I think what you see is a commitment in this room from everybody who wants to make this a reality, who wants to make it happen, because it needs to happen. It needs to happen. We need to absolutely continue this fight. I'm expecting more legislation coming from our land use committee that's generating a lot of good ideas, as well as our affordability committee that Representative Speakman handles as well. So without that, a big thank you to everybody involved, everybody who voted for it. A special shout out, he's not here today, my good friend, the Senate President, who without his support of these bills, none of it becomes a reality. So I want to thank Dominic Ruggiero very much. I thank him very much. And it's my pleasure to introduce, representing the Senate today, Senator Megan Coleman. Senator Coleman.
Speaker. I thought I was down a little further on the list. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. You know, I'm from Pawtucket. I represent Pawtucket and Providence. This is like a big expedition for me to come down here, and I'm really excited to be here. I want to begin by recognizing all of the advocates and the leaders and everyone else in this room who is committed to addressing the housing crisis, and I would say that is everybody in this room. Thank you, Speaker Shekarchi, for making this issue a top priority year after year, and to the leadership in my own chamber for doing the same, Senate President Ruggiero, and so many members of our chamber. So the list of Senate supporters of this year's housing bills speaks to the depth of the support for this issue and it demonstrates how seriously we're taking it. We have my good friend and colleague, Senator Melissa Murray, up here, Senator Victoria Gu, who sponsored the ADU bill, Senator David Takoyan, Senator Mark McKinney, Senator John Burke, and Senator Lou DePalma, as well as many colleagues throughout the House. My apologies if I've missed anyone. And also our House counterparts, including Representative Batista, who actually worked with me on legislation to spur the redevelopment of abandoned properties. And just as a little bit of a sobering anecdote, the reason that we're here today is because we still have a problem. Last week, I got a call from a panicked constituent whose coworker was losing her home. She's a single mother to a 7-year-old son, landlord selling the building. They don't have anywhere to go. End of the month is going to be here in a few days, and we still don't know where they're going, right? These are the human stakes of the issue that we're looking to solve. But that said, there's been a lot of progress, and today I want to specifically highlight the ADU legislation sponsored by Senator Gu and Rep. Speakman. For a state that has historically ranked last in the country on housing production, ADUs are game changers. In fact, I was at a conference this last week and I got to brag to Delaware that we got our bill over the finish line. They're still working on theirs and they're actually using ours as a model. But they are such a critical piece of action to address the crisis in housing and availability and affordability. ADUs help people stay where they are. They extend to all corners of our communities, providing critically needed housing for people who perhaps want to age in place, for young people who are perhaps coming back from college, starting their lives, starting their careers. My mother, somewhat recently, kind of dropped into conversation that she was also interested in living in an ADU with me. That was news to me, but I'm really glad now that we have the structure to make that happen. And at the end of the day, every Rhode Islander deserves a safe and affordable place to call home. That's why we are all here. I'm so grateful that we moved ahead on ADUs as well as the range of other bills here to be signed today. And I'm confident that as we continue to work on our housing initiatives, we can also continue to link them to other priorities that this legislature is committed to solving, such as climate, such as health, such as public transportation. There are ways in which all of these things talk to each other. So I'm looking forward very much to working with all of you to continue to move this down the field. And with that, I am happy to introduce Representative June Speakman.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the privilege of speaking with you this afternoon. Before I have some remarks that push a metaphor that I introduced back in March, but before I do that, I want to thank the Commission on Housing Affordability that I am honored to chair. Many of you are in the room right now. That brings together all the best thinkers and doers on housing policy in the state, from the builders to the realtors to the nonprofit developers, to the Rhode Island Foundation, to the Department of Housing, Rhode Island Housing. Everyone who has anything smart to say about housing has volunteered to join this commission. They have devoted hundreds of hours over the past 3 years and will continue. Thank you very much for your ongoing service in the coming year. It was a commission that was given a 1-year lease, and it has been extended and extended and extended. So I am deeply grateful for your service and for everything that you've done for the state to help us move this conversation forward. I also want to thank the advocates who are relentless, the staff at the House, Lynn Urbani in particular, who guides the legislative content for us, and the speaker, of course, without whom none of this would happen. My colleagues who have sponsored, many of the sponsors of the bills are in the chamber, my colleagues in the Senate who have also got on board. And the media, politicians usually don't thank the media, but Rhode Island's media has focused on housing in a way in the past couple of years that really helps us move this conversation forward. So thanks to all y'all. So when we gathered last March at the State House for a press conference to announce the introduction of many of these bills, I, in my remarks, referred to our common task of addressing the housing needs of Rhode Islanders as a puzzle. And I'd like to, again, push that metaphor just a little bit. So this housing puzzle is really hard to solve, as we all know, but it's essential to solve. And we all work together to find the pieces and to decide how to fit them together to make this work. Sometimes we disagree on what piece goes where, on whose hands are the ones that get to fit that piece into the puzzle, but we continue to work on it together. And sometimes there are pieces of the puzzle that are missing. They're under the table, they're still in the box, they haven't even been constructed yet. And we all have to figure out together what to do. For example, how to help renters who are paying more than 50% of their income on housing We haven't figured that piece out yet, and I hope we can work on that really diligently this year. And on Senator Coleman, when folks have received word that their rent is going too high or they're being evicted, we really need to work on helping those folks out. And as the speaker often says, production is the partial answer to this question, but there are also other things we need to do and to work on this year. This set of bills that that the governor is about to sign today helps us solve this puzzle. As you've already heard, some of them make the process of approving or of rejecting development proposals easier and quicker. And even if the proposals don't work, it's important to move them through quickly so we can get on to the next proposal. The option of combining zoning and planning, as the governor mentioned, the encouragement of e-permitting, these are all ways of smoothing out the process to make us move more for getting production done. Some of these bills, as Senator Coleman said, give property owners a bit more flexibility in how they use their property, like the ability to build an ADU or a manufactured home on your lot. Others provide better information about available land and building for housing developments. Through the Commission's work, we've discovered that we don't know what we don't know. What vacant lands are open for construction, what buildings can be adaptively reused, and we are some of these bills allow for the gathering of that information. So all of that should, we hope, make it easier to develop and build housing, but in a way that does not undermine the character of our communities. And about those communities, our municipal governments. As you may know, I'm a former municipal elected, and I know how important municipalities hold on to the control that they have over what happens in their communities, and how, as they say, and they're right, one size doesn't fit all. What makes sense for Warwick might not make sense for Warren, where I live. But I can tell you that this year in particular, both chambers engaged with municipal planners and with the League of Cities and Towns to make sure that the local voice was heard as these bills move through the process. They don't always get what they want, but those of you who do legislation know that nobody always gets what they want in this process, right? And we also know that Governor McKee hears the voices of mayors and town administrators loudly and clearly. Some of his best friends are mayors, right? And he has a different kind of pen that he could use on these bills if they didn't move his agenda forward. So thanks to you, Governor, for signing these bills, and to all of you for your support as we continue to work on putting this puzzle together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here with Senator Coleman, my colleague who has been a champion for housing action and so many other issues that matter to working people in Rhode Island. I'm also grateful to Senate President Ruggiero and our Senate leadership, our Senate colleagues, Speaker Shikarchi, and our partners in the House, and the many other stakeholders who have contributed so much to this work. I also want to specifically thank the Speaker for working with me on legislation that will allow municipalities to issue for building permits electronically. This is the kind of modern, innovative, and streamlined approach that we must take when it comes to housing. We've made progress on this issue in recent years, but the housing emergency we face remains very real, and we have so much work ahead of us. This issue is not unique to Rhode Island, but in terms of new housing production, as the Speaker says, we've fallen significantly behind our neighbors in New England and the rest of the country. Turning this situation around is absolutely essential. It's critical for children and families who need and deserve the stability that comes from a safe and affordable place to live. It's critical for our economy, so people can afford to live and work and stay in Rhode Island. And it's critical for our communities so that young folks can realize the dream of home ownership and Rhode Islanders can age at home with dignity and security. Housing is a human right. And I'm going to go off script for a moment here because I want to share with you my own personal experience. About 1.5 years ago, I was faced with finding housing. I am a renter. It took me well over 6 months to find a place in my district that I could afford that met my needs. And fortunately, I was not faced with a deadline or faced with a huge rent increase. Imagine a state senator who has all of those hurdles to overcome to find housing. How much more exponentially difficult it is for someone without my resources. So the bottom line is, addressing the housing emergency and ending housing security is essential for Rhode Island's future. The crisis impacts people from all walks of life in every single corner of our state.
And although the steps we are celebrating today will have a meaningful and positive impact, even as we celebrate, we must together recommit ourselves to changing Rhode Island's long-term trajectory in terms of housing affordability and availability. So on behalf of my colleagues in the Senate, I know that we are united in that commitment, and I know that everybody here is united in that commitment. So thank you all for being here today and for everything that you do. It is my pleasure to introduce Interim Housing Secretary Dan Connors.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invite. I want to just begin by saying that the Rhode Island Department of Housing is the state's lead agency for housing, homelessness, and community development, thanks to the collective efforts of the key decision makers here. So thank you for putting that forward as a priority for the state. I'm grateful to be here, so thank you, Governor, for the temporary assignment. I'm very grateful to continue focus on the common good, much as I was able to do at the Health and Human Services Department. So today is a significant milestone in the ongoing efforts to mitigate the housing crisis. And I just have to thank the Governor for his leadership in housing, as well as the Speaker, who, together with the Senate President, got a pile of bills here that are going to help ensure that every Rhode Islander has a safe, healthy, and affordable place to call home. I'd like to thank Speaker Shikachi, as many have already, but collectively the General Assembly and the individuals who sponsored the legislation that's before the Governor today. I know many of the names have been called, and I see Senator Mack did join us as well. So thank you for your support of housing as well. I know that your efforts have and will make a difference in the housing landscape in Rhode Island. Many of these bills will accelerate production by streamlining and removing obstacles to the permitting process, as you've heard, and that accordingly represents a major barrier to producing affordable quality homes being addressed. And that's the type of thoughtful leadership that I think we can all really be proud of. For decades, Rhode Island has been struggling to produce enough housing units. That scarcity has led to unaffordable homes, rising homelessness, and health risks, quite honestly, for vulnerable populations. The limited inventory and the skyrocketing value of home ownership is becoming out of reach for many Rhode Islanders. So these tools become incredibly important. I was sort of surprised that in the 80s, I think it was around 86, we had our peak production year. I was 10 years old at the time. And now, in the 80s, we were producing more than 3 times the number of housing units that we did in 2022. And even in 2025, the state's housing production rate was double that of 2022. So we must reverse this trend. And I think the bills that are being signed today will really, truly help to turn the tide. The housing challenges, as I mentioned, developed over decades, and the progress will not happen overnight. There is significant work ahead, but it's important to remember that we are moving forward on a path of progress here. The innovative policies will set the stage for reversing that trend, and I won't go through each of the bills that have been mentioned, but I'm really, specifically going to just call out something that has not been mentioned, which I think is critically important to future success in housing. The package, in addition to the myriad uses that have already been identified, really puts forward a focus on improving the quality of information developed by a comprehensive statewide geographic information system to improve data management and integration. There's a long way to go. I was lucky to sit at a state planning council meeting a couple of weeks ago, and was kind of thinking back to some of the conversations that we were having in Cumberland, like 15 years ago. So each bill contributes uniquely to the overarching goal of increasing the availability of affordable homes, tackling the issue from multiple agencies, and creating a more robust and effective solution which will ensure Rhode Islanders have safe, quality, and affordable place to call home. And I would be not doing my job if I didn't take a moment to really put a fine point on the $120 million housing bond that the governor and the General Assembly proposed and will be on the ballot in November. The Department of Housing and our partners in the community, and I see many of them here, are really going to take this work forward, have the resources necessary to build on the foundation that the legislation that's being signed today sets forth. The work is not done. It will take continued effort to produce the housing the state needs, but with the leadership of our state focused on this issue, which it very clearly is, I think we're on a good path to reversing the trend. So in closing, I just want to thank Governor McKee for the opportunity for this temporary assignment. I want to thank the Speaker, the Senate President, the General Assembly, each and every one of you. I know you have a tough job. Many of your victories go unheralded, and any errors that you make certainly find their way to the front. But today is a day for celebration because for far too long, for too many decades, housing didn't get the attention that it rightly deserves. But you're rising to the challenge, and I'm just very grateful to be here to help execute the laws that you put on the books and to bring forward that mission that you bring alive through the budget. So thank you for your work, for your commitment, for your service to the people of Rhode Island, and quite honestly for helping to lift up the least fortunate among us. It's not lost on me, and thank you to all of you for the work that you've done.